As the duel ended, life among the rebels returned swiftly to a stark, disciplined routine. For the past 5 celestial years, they had known nothing but rigorous preparation, their days consumed by endless training, drills, and strategy. The cheers and celebrations had long since faded, replaced by a steady, resolute silence, the calm before the storm. In distant celestial halls, unseen and unheard by mortals and lesser deities, Ruhanga had finished his grim work. The elder god of war and technologies stood back from the massive obsidian device, his eyes reflecting cold satisfaction. He had succeeded. His creation would mask their divine signatures and channel the hatred of the Unnamed Ones. Once unleashed, these creatures, those cursed beings born of elder arrogance, would hunt relentlessly, driven by an insatiable need to eradicate any trace of their hated creators. Orunmila, who stood silently in the council chambers, was the only voice of dissent. But even he knew that some fates could not be altered. As the god of fate, he had seen the outcomes ripple through infinite timelines. Interfering now would only bring greater disaster, an imbalance more catastrophic than the war itself. And so, with heavy silence, he allowed events to unfold. Across Alkebulan, the very fabric of reality trembled as the Elder God's ominous project was unleashed. A portal split the heavens, its edges crackling with divine energy as it tore open a forgotten realm, releasing the horrors they had created in their hubris, the Unnamed Ones. Beings whose very existence was a blasphemy against creation surged into the mortal plane. Unlike the Nekwama, these beings were not mindless. They burned with intelligence, anger, and a deep-seated hatred for the gods who brought them into being. Bound within them was an endless, insatiable rage, carefully redirected by Ruhanga's sinister device to seek out the greatest divine pressure, Madinga. The rebel encampment had settled for the night, unaware that disaster was already rushing toward them like a storm unleashed. It began not with the roar of a distant army, but with a single, catastrophic explosion that tore the camp apart, sending warriors scrambling from their tents, startled and disoriented. Madinga felt it first. His eyes snapped open, body instantly tense, heart hammering with a primal urgency. He could feel it, the divine pressure of something terrible, ancient and filled with an overwhelming rage directed solely at him. He stood quickly, grasping his spear. It took only moments to realize something was horribly wrong. The divine energies pressing against his mind were impossible, their sheer weight suffocating. His mind raced. He counted dozens. No, at least 100. Each pulse of energy resonated like thunder in his bones, filled with such malevolence and resentment that for the first time in his life, Madinga knew what it meant to truly feel fear. He rushed through the panicked camp to find Midis already awake, his twin swords strapped to his back. His eyes narrowed as he scanned the horizon. Midis met Madinga's eyes, reading the alarm in his face instantly. "What is it?" Midis demanded sharply, sensing the tension radiating from Madinga. "I don't know," Madinga said breathlessly. "There are hundreds of them. Their divine pressure is immense, overwhelming. It's directed solely at me." Before Midis could respond, another explosion erupted nearby, shaking the very ground beneath their feet. Half the encampment vanished in a wave of destructive power, carrying away warriors, tents, and weapons in its merciless tide. Screams echoed through the night, a chorus of agony and confusion that pierced the hearts of those who survived. Zuberi, Nyoka, Ekundayo, and Chakara surged forward, weapons drawn, battle-ready despite the carnage. They took position around Midis and Madinga, forming a defensive perimeter with practiced efficiency, eyes locked on the approaching tide of darkness. Each iron rebel stood firm, their souls hardened by past losses and present resolve. They knew this was unlike any enemy they had faced. This was not battle, it was annihilation. Iru appeared suddenly from the shadows, his usually calm face now etched with deep lines of guilt and regret. He moved swiftly to Madinga, urgency vibrating in his voice. "Take this," he commanded, placing a magnificent spear into Madinga's hands. A weapon so powerful, its very presence seemed to hum with divine energy. The God Spear. It was forged for you to channel your true power. You must wield it, Madinga, or we are lost. Madinga gripped the spear tightly, feeling an immediate surge of strength course through him, bolstering his spirit even as dread surrounded them. The weapon felt like an extension of his very being, attuned perfectly to the fierce, raw power that surged within him. His eyes met Iru's for a fleeting moment, a silent exchange of understanding, gratitude and fear. The sky darkened abruptly, blotting out the stars as the enemy surged forward. Countless monstrosities racing toward the camp, their bodies crackling with dark, divine energy. The rebel warriors stood no chance against them, overwhelmed instantly by beings whose power outmatched theirs many times over. This was no mere battle of blades or martial skill. It was a clash of divine pressures, of pure celestial power. The Unnamed Ones tore through the camp effortlessly, destroying everything in their path, driven only by their hatred of the divine, following the beacon of power that radiated from Madinga. One by one, the lesser rebels fell, powerless to resist, their screams filling the night air. But Madinga and Midis held their ground, their combined might stemming the tide just enough to rally the iron rebels. Zuberi charged forward with a roar, fists shattering bodies like glass. Nyoka darted through shadows, dispatching foes with poison-soaked blades and silent kills. Ekundayo laughed as he fought, his sword dancing with unbridled joy amid chaos, while Chakara unleashed precise strikes of lightning, her spear a blur in the madness. Yet despite their valor, their strength was barely enough to hold back the tide. This enemy was beyond them, creatures born to destroy gods themselves. And though Midis and Madinga fought valiantly, though their skill cut through the enemy ranks, both knew deep down it would not be enough. Midis, wielding his swords with deadly precision, realized grimly that the elder gods had finally found the perfect weapon against them. Creatures whose entire existence was hatred, beings whose very essence was destruction. He fought harder, driven by desperation, knowing that each second mattered. Madinga, on the other hand, began to channel his divine power into the spear, cutting through enemies with unparalleled precision, destroying dozens with each strike. He was a storm, relentless and unyielding, his presence dominating the battlefield. Amid the carnage, Midis realized something chilling. The Unnamed Ones had eyes only for Madinga. No matter how many rebel warriors stood in their way, their true goal was to annihilate the one being who radiated the power of their creators. With grim clarity, Midis shouted to his warriors, commanding them to regroup, to protect Madinga at all costs. For in this devastating onslaught, one thing was painfully clear. The rebellion itself hung in the balance, its survival tied inexorably to the fate of one warrior. Madinga fought like never before, his body moving instinctively, driven by raw survival instinct and fierce determination. Each thrust of his spear channeled divine power, annihilating foes in blinding flashes of light. Yet beneath his strength, exhaustion slowly built. His body grew heavy, muscles trembling with fatigue, his spirit straining under the relentless assault. They were strong, he knew, but the enemy was endless, tireless beings with no fear, no hesitation, driven only by boundless rage. Yet, as the battle raged on, one thing became painfully clear. The rebels were losing. One by one, their numbers dwindled. Madinga and Midis continued to fight fiercely side by side, but even their combined might was being pushed to its limits. Then, suddenly, there was silence. A pause, as Midis turned to Madinga, bloodied and breathless. "Madinga," he called urgently, his voice firm yet tinged with desperation. "You need to run. We'll hold them here. You must survive." Madinga shook his head, defiance blazing in his eyes. "No, I will never abandon you." Midis smiled faintly, a sorrowful pride in his eyes. "You have no choice, Madinga. This isn't your battle, it's ours. We exist for this moment. You are meant for something greater." But before Madinga could answer, the enemy surged again, a wave of relentless fury descending upon them. The battle resumed, fiercer, bloodier than before. Madinga fought on, each strike more desperate, each move driven by sheer survival instinct. He knew Midis was right. This was only the beginning. Yet, as dawn slowly broke on the horizon, casting a pale light upon the battlefield strewn with fallen warriors, something inside Madinga awakened fully. He could feel it, a power unlike anything he had known. His eyes glowed fiercely, his divine pressure rising uncontrollably, shaking the very air around him. At that moment, he understood what Iru had always said. His true strength lay not just in skill or divine energy, but in the unbreakable will that had brought him this far. He would not flee, he would not surrender, he would fight to the end. And as his power exploded outward, illuminating the battlefield in blinding brilliance, the Unnamed Ones finally saw clearly what they were truly facing. Not a child, not merely another enemy, but a god who could shake the very foundations of existence itself. The rebels had known war. It had shaped their very existence. Each of them had seen the horrors of battle, experienced the relentless fury of divine forces, and lived through the darkest days of their resistance. But nothing could have prepared them for the terror that descended upon their camp that fateful night. It wasn't a matter of surprise or unpreparedness. They had felt danger looming for days. Yet when the assault came, it felt like the very earth had turned against them, shaking violently beneath their feet, trembling as if desperate to flee from the malevolent force that now sought them. And as the Unnamed Ones surged forward again, their hatred surging around him like a dark sea, Madinga stepped forward, ready to embrace the destiny that had called to him from the moment of his birth. Midis shouted desperate commands over the screams and explosions, his voice hoarse but firm. Non-combatants fled hastily, guided by the trembling but determined Iru. The scientist led them toward a distant refuge, a hidden sanctuary beyond the reach of destruction. Yet even as Iru disappeared into the horizon with those he could save, he glanced back, haunted by guilt. These monstrosities that tore through his people were born from his past ambitions, the fruits of his own misguided collaboration with the elder gods. He felt responsible, as if the deaths raining around him were a consequence of his own arrogance. With one last sorrowful glance, Iru vanished into the distance, hoping he'd saved enough lives to redeem his past. On the battlefield, the Iron Rebels fought fiercely, but their numbers thinned rapidly under the relentless assault of the Unnamed Ones. The creatures attacked mercilessly, surging forward in waves, unyielding and unstoppable. It was not long before Ekundayo, laughing with defiant madness even in his final moments, fell under a storm of blows. He fought until his body broke, his spirit unconquered, defiant laughter echoing even as darkness overtook him. Nyoka vanished next, succumbing silently, fiercely, never allowing his enemies the satisfaction of his screams, his poisoned blades taking several enemies with him into oblivion. Zuberi, a mountain of strength, fell roaring defiantly, his fists tearing through countless foes before exhaustion and overwhelming numbers finally brought him down. The battle had now narrowed to a desperate stand. Madinga, Midis, and Chakra remained alongside two wounded rebel warriors. their bodies battered, their energy nearly spent, facing a horde that refused to slow or relent. Bloodied and breathless, Madinga swung the god spear with divine wrath, each strike obliterating his enemies. Yet he felt his strength waning, every thrust heavier than the last, every breath more difficult. His mind raced, searching for any strategy to turn the tide, but despair loomed ever closer. It was no longer a matter of victory, it was pure survival. In the briefest lull of combat, Midis moved close, breathing heavily, bloodied but unbowed. "Madinga," he said, gripping his swords tightly, their blades stained red and black from countless battles. "We can't hold much longer. You have to go. Leave while we hold them off. You must survive this." "No!" Madinga shouted back defiantly, eyes blazing with stubborn determination. "I won't leave you. I won't abandon our family." Midis gritted his teeth, desperation flickering in his gaze. "You're the only hope left. If you die, our rebellion dies with you. Don't let our sacrifices be in vain." Before Madinga could respond, another wave of enemies crashed upon them, forcing him back into furious combat. Yet even as he fought, Midis's words haunted him. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily upon his heart. Could he truly leave these warriors, his companions, his family behind? Could he accept survival at the cost of their lives? Then, suddenly, a moment of chaos shattered his thoughts. An overwhelming force surged forward, aiming directly at Chakara, catching her off guard. Madinga turned, lunging desperately to shield her, but a powerful hand grabbed him from behind, throwing him to safety. He stumbled forward, landing hard, turning just in time to witness Iru, who had inexplicably returned, standing in front of Chakara, arms outstretched, absorbing the full brunt of the attack meant for him. The assault tore through the aged god, and in an instant, the air filled with an awful, haunting silence. Madinga stared in disbelief. "Iru!" he cried, his voice raw with agony as he raced to the old scientist's side. "Why? Why did you come back?" Iru, his body trembling and blood spilling freely, met Madinga's anguished gaze. "I had to," he gasped, each breath more difficult than the last. "These creatures, I helped bring them into existence. They are my responsibility." "No, Iru, stay with me," Madinga pleaded, tears stinging his eyes, rage and sorrow twisting painfully within him. "You promised you'd lead the others to safety. Why did you come back?" Iru's eyes softened, filled with pride and regret. "I couldn't let your mother's legacy die," he whispered weakly, his words faltering. "She wished for you to live a life of peace, not revenge. Forgive me, Madinga. I failed her. And you." Madinga shook his head desperately, tears blurring his vision. "Don't speak like that. You can't leave. I still need you." Iru smiled faintly, grasping Madinga's hand with his weakening grip. "You already have everything you need. You always did. Remember, revenge won't heal your heart. Live free, like she wished. With those final words, Iru's eyes closed forever, his hand falling limp. Something inside Madinga shattered in that moment. A wall he'd carefully built, guarding his raw power, suppressing his true strength. Now, rage surged uncontrollably within him, burning brighter than ever before, merging with profound grief, sorrow, and agony. Every ounce of his pain ignited into an inferno. He rose slowly, and for the first time, Madinga let go completely, allowing the full magnitude of his divine energy to burst forth without restraint. His eyes flared brilliantly, illuminating the darkened battlefield with radiant fury. He raised a single hand, and with an effortless motion, unleashed a wave of devastating force. 15 unnamed ones vanished instantly, reduced to cosmic dust in an instant of divine judgment. The surviving warriors watched in shock and awe, their breaths caught in their throats, unable to comprehend what they had witnessed. Midis stared in astonishment, feeling the overwhelming divine pressure pouring from Madinga, a presence that rivaled even the elder gods. And in that moment, Midis realized the truth. Madinga was no longer a boy, nor even merely a prodigy. He was becoming something entirely new, a force even the elder gods would come to fear. Yet, as Madinga stood amidst the chaos, chest heaving, his body crackling with residual divine power, he felt no joy, no victory, only a deep, heavy emptiness. His gaze fell upon the fallen bodies of his friends, his family, and his mentor, Iru. Their loss burned through him, carving scars deeper than any blade. His face showed no visible emotion, but within him burned a clear, unyielding resolve.